Alright guys, round number 3. First it was Berserker, then it was a Mesmer build. Today I want to talk to you, game of the day, it's more like build of the day today, about another concept. All things Condi Firebrand. So I've done a really deep dive here, and we're going to start actually in-game. I'm going to talk about the build. I'm going to talk a lot about the build because of the 3 that I've done, this is the one I've gone kind of heaviest on, deepest on, and tried the most different things on. I really wanted to explore and understand everything I can about Condi Firebrand, about why it's bad, about why it's good, and all that kind of stuff. If it exists on Guardian, you can almost guarantee I've tried it. If the rune is a seeming fit, or the amulet is a seeming fit, you can almost guarantee I've tried it. I have tried Carrion, I have tried Deadshot, I have tried Sages, I have tried Wizards, I have tried all kinds of different things, and yeah, I got a lot to talk about in what's kind of fun, and I'm going to take the Buildcraft into another direction soon, so we'll see. So resetting placements over and over and over again on this, I'm actually coming out lower than I normally would, so barely scraping plat or even getting top of gold at the end of a lot of placements. Some have still ended up really high, and one of them ended up even quite low. The lowest set of placements I've ever done was on this build. But yeah, so it's a really nuanced thing, actually, about why Condi Firebrand kind of works in some ways and why it doesn't. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just talk you through what I've ended up on, and we'll go from there. But first, some very real disadvantages to playing a Condi Firebrand. Have nothing, like a DPS Firebrand, basically, is the idea, right? And there's various ways you can go, but I'm going to be talking about Condi here today. One of the big disadvantages is simply the nature of the matchmaking and the queuing, and the community mindset and understanding and expectation. So basically, if you try this, you will be hated on. There is a definite thing, and it's much more pronounced on EU. EU has a lot more AFKing and a lot less tolerance for non-conformity. The people in the EU are much more narrow-minded about things. And I mean, I know that that's a bit of a generalization, but the truth is there's not that many PvPers around right now, so you kind of can get a feel for a different culture, right, as per the region. The problem with this build, first of all, is that if you queue in on a Firebrand and people see that specialization icon there, or they click you, before this build, they'd have to click you, and they'd mouse over and see you're a Firebrand. They 100%, much more in EU than NA, expect it to be support. And so you've kind of got 2 choices. You can start typing in chat and having to interact with people and say, oh, hey, I'm not support. And then there's the inevitable, oh, why aren't you playing support? That's so bad discussion. You know, you have to identify yourself as non-meta, while other build experiments you can do, you can just kind of do it in silence. So you can either try and explain that to people, or you can do what I did, which is just give up on that. There's really no point. And what will happen is you'll either get people really salty that they die in team fights because they're expecting heals and they don't get them, or enough of them, which is fair, right? Like, to be upset about that. You either get people in that situation, or the much more prominent thing as well, because, I mean, I appear offline. I don't even look at chat while I'm PvPing a lot of the time. The other prominent thing, however, is no one will ever support you. So if you play like a DPS Firebrand that's a little bit more selfish and a little bit, glassier, this is a build that could benefit from a support of some kind. It would benefit from a support Tempest. It would benefit from its own support Firebrand. Now, personally, I think going with the Tempest would actually be smarter because you wouldn't overlap in terms of unique modifiers. You would be able to offer all the Firebrand stuff, like Hold the Line, for example. And then a support Tempest would be able to put, you know, various auras and things on top of you. So, like, that would be the ideal support. But you won't ever get that, realistically. Because people will queue in and they'll see that there's already a Firebrand on the team. They'll assume you're healing. And then what they will do is they'll swap to aggressive stuff instead. And so you kind of just have a bit of a nightmare there. I even went so far, honestly did this, as to queuing on Scourge, alright? And so people would load in, see the composition with a Scourge, and it might encourage one of the other 4 players to swap to Firebrand to support me, and then in the last 20 seconds, I would quickly character select and go back to Firebrand, which is really kind of scummy in some ways, but actually evens the comp out in a lot of ways. And then you've got double Firebrand in your team, and people start freaking out. I mean, I'm serious. On EU, people really lose their crap seeing double Firebrand. Even if they have no understanding about what's going on at a deeper level than that. And the thing is, like, 90% of players, even on EU, they don't people are very low awareness, let me just say that. They won't see that there's a ton of pressure and kills coming from burning or from one of the Firebrands' damage. There's just, like, ungodly pressure there. They don't think in those terms. They don't look at what's killing the opponents. They don't see the rate of enemy deaths. They're not thinking about the build. They basically have I'm not trying to be rude, but the mental capacity to see the specialization icon. And if the team is losing and they see double Firebrands, they'll just immediately say, "Oh, that was the problem." Even if, you know, you've got 0 deaths, you're on 18 kills and a ton of damage or whatever, right? Like, they'll whine at the 2 Firebrands and the double up. They don't really understand. They need to be coddled in chat, and that's a bit of a thing. So anyway, yes, that's one whole side that really just kicks a build like this in the teeth instantly because of that expectation management thing. There are a lot of people who just have no tolerance for outsider stuff, and you are very blatantly an outsider thing on this, right? You can run a lot of gimmicky, weird, strange builds on other classes and other positions, but not for, and I think uniquely not here on this. Obviously there's the matter of signets and stuff on other builds that will get you called out, but yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of the start. All of that aside, if you still want to queue on one of these, let's talk about it. So the role is definitely like that damage role, that pressure role. But it's funny because this can, well, oh god, there's so much to talk about. I'll just talk you through what I'm running. The idea here is to do big damage, but also I wanted a build that could do a lot of pressure, but also interact very well with teammates. Right, so I wanted it to hit various bars of, I want to be able to do damage, I want to be able to swing fights, I want to have a ton of impact. You remember on that Mesmer build I was playing recently, I started to feel like I was too low impact. So I really want to be, you know, actually a powerhouse in these engagements as long as I'm careful with my positioning. I was happy to be vulnerable to some extent, to, you know, focus pressure. But I wanted it to be able to stomp people down, contribute to resurrect and stuff like that very comfortably. But importantly, I wanted to be able to interact with people. I wanted to be able to give my allies stab. I wanted to be able to cleanse my allies. I wanted to be able to do all those things that good builds can do. That if I really am paying attention, I'm seeing my allies being pressured, I can swing games because I can help keep my guys alive, remove their incapacitating effects and stuff like that. And Firebrand is kind of perfect for that. I sort of really love it, right? Like, you get 5 skill bars, okay? And there's just so much you can do. Even if you're not amulet and runed and stuff for support, you are a Firebrand, so you can give people resist, and you can drop reflect bubbles, and you can taunt people away. And no matter what your healing power, your toughness, your vitality is Aegis, guys. And you can spam just as much Aegis out on the build I'm about to show you as you can on anything else, right? So these are playmaking potentials, right? You can flip a ton of boons on Eternal Oasis here, a ton of condies into boons on Eternal Oasis. It's got nothing to do with anything else. So I actually really love what I'm talking about today in terms of that. And so while I just said, you know, this is kind of like a DPS, a damagey, a team fighter thing, this is actually a godly 2v2er. It's really, really, I win so many 2v2s, even 3v2s and stuff, and I'm going to be showing you a ton of bonus clips in a minute. That's what basically today's game of the day is going to be. I'm showing you loads of clips where it's really, really strong. I'll tell you what else this is also amazing at. Now, it's low mobility, okay? So it's not great as a 1vxer just because it has low mobility. And you might say, well, why is that, WP? A 1vxer, realistically, you need mobility to be able to bail from a really dangerous plus, right? You can only kite for so long, then you have to leave. And if this thing gets caught on the roads, it is too low mobility really to be that great. Now, I've played with a ton of different things, including double intervention builds, which have been fun, and I reckon if you were duo queuing, a double intervention build would be amazing, because you could have allies positioned in such a way you can always bail out. But it's not a great side noter just because of that 1v1, just because of that escape thing. In Season 1, you saw me talking about that on a Blighter's Boon or a Reaper style thing. But that aside, in terms of matchups, it's actually pretty good. I've cleared out the side-noding Soul Beast builds here. This has got... if you play this perfectly, I think this has a 100% win rate against Warriors. And I'll show you some Warrior stuff soon. And so, you know, some of the variations of the build anyway are very good. It can snap down kills and all kinds of things. It's actually pretty good in those very low player heavy engagements where, you know, maybe it's a 1v1, but 2v2s it really shines, and the team fights as well, it can be really, really, really good as well. So so yeah, that's kind of the idea behind the build, and it's a lot of fun, a really rewarding build. But is it that good? Just because of the problems I elucidated a second ago about with the matchmaking and the snobbery and kind of the way that the community is, I actually think it is a bit of a downside. And the truth is, it's kind of that question of why would you run this when something else fills the role a bit better, right? And that's always going to be sort of the plague if you're trying to be really, 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 really good at the game, and the thing that people will always ask. But as far as casual rank queues are concerned, this is one of the most fun builds I've ever played. So let's go into it. I guess I will just go in the ArenaNet order, as in like up here, and then we'll work our way through, and I'll talk about what I'm running and why. So first, weapon sets. And I guess that the main one to talk about here is Axe, and then the focus here. So why Axe? Well, Axe is a good Condi pressure build. One of the traits actually adds days on here, and if you take that trait, it makes it a much better 1v1er, and 1v-extra, I guess, to some extent, because you can interrupt so frequently. You actually get double CCs here, so this is good for preventing reses as well if you take that trait, because you can, if your first CC doesn't land, then the second one might, because you get the pull on the 3 in this. It's actually pretty good pressure, and in particular, the auto is a good pressure chain. And I generally wanted to play with Axe and see how it feels. To be honest, this isn't the be-all and end-all, I don't think, but I do have fun with this, and yeah, it's one of our heavier hitters. Now, you'll notice here I'm running Focus, and not Torch. So I did try Torch for a long time. Torch is the obvious thing for a Condi build, but it just doesn't have enough. There's not enough potential there, I don't think, and it's too vulnerable. I'm running Focus because the block spam during stomps, during evades, during all kinds of stuff is really useful, particularly pairing this with the Axe so that you can continue unloading your pressure, and the 2 in particular, and the auto chains can feel a bit slow to get through. I really like the Focus. Also, Ray of Judgment here. Obviously, your passive on your F1, it burns after every few strikes, and this is 9 hits from really, really far away. So you actually score a lot of kills here because of the hybrid pressure from this. And I guess the main thing to talk about is most of my games have actually been wizard games. It's a wizard Firebrand. And kind of the concept here is to really min-max in your pressure aspects, in the damage aspects, and I'll go into that in a second, but particularly when you're on Wizards, you know, you got a ton of power on Wizard, you get a ton of crit chance on Wizard, and then all the Condi damage you want as well on top. So the Ray of Judgment can, you know, really be kind of nice. So that's just for lots of individual packets, and this is kind of your main pressure set here. Then in the offset, and you can swap the, sorry, here we're in the build panel. You can swap the offhands around if you like. But in the offset, I've got Scepter Shield. And you might think, well, Scepter's not got any Condi on it, really. But again, on the Wizard idea, the point is you get tons of packets of damage. This stacks Might on you as well. And if you're doing any kind of hybrid pressure and Condi builds, Might is great because it buffs both of those attributes at once, right? But it's just lots and lots of separate packets. So what you do is you drop the Scepter 2, then you get onto the Axe, you drop the Axe 2, and you've got double symbols on there with a Ray of Judgment rolling, and then you're just cleaving through, and the burn stacks just tick up massively just because of the F1 passive. But also, you can Chains of Light. You can emote people from range and then quickly swap to the Ray of Judgment. And you can, hold them there, get that on before pulling them back in with the Axe 3 and whatnot. But really, this is your kite set. Like, the point is, if you're caught in a dangerous situation, if you're caught on a side node for any reason, which will happen, no matter what role you're playing, in a solo queue, it can happen that you're caught in these ugly situations. You can actually pull up to the side. And this is one of the reasons why it's actually okay on side nodes, because you can go to some kind of kite spot and you can actually pressure. This is actually very similar to what I showed you on Soul Beast recently. Soul Beast being an actual meta build, right? And you had that Axe set there, where the Axe, the main hand was some range pressure. And then you had the shield, the axe offhand for some reflects and stuff. Shield is amazing, right? It's so good. It's obviously reflect, which you can hold as you're running away. There's a lot of range pressure. There's a lot of dead eyes around. There's a lot of soul beasts around, and this is good to just hold. You can run a lot around with your allies and hold it there too. And then the heal as well. You might think, is the heal really that good? But when you go into your F2, you can Eternal Oasis, which buffs the healing potency. And then you can double tap the shield, and you can, with the benevolence buff, you can heal other people around you just that little bit more. Shield is honestly really good. And then obviously another block too, and there's some block synergy obviously with the build, which we'll get to in a second. So yeah, that's kind of the weapons. And one of the things I'm actually going to be playing with in the future is Staff. Which I will, there's a whole story with Staff about how it can save you from mirages and stuff, which I will talk about at a later date. But for all the bonus clips and everything you're going to be watching here, we're going to be on these weapon sets. So, yeah, that's the weapons. Then for the sigils, I've kept it very, very simple for now. We're on Smoldering, which is burn duration, and Doom, which is poison application. So the poison application is excellent for down body cleaves, which you really... So if you're on a Condi build and you're trying to cleave... You need poison on the Condi, but you need it because there's not much front-loaded damage. There is a ramp time to getting the conditions on the body so that it cannot be rezzed, okay? Remember, when someone goes down state, they cleanse all conditions, and then they're very, very easy to be rezzed. What poison does for a Condi build during a cleaving scenario is it reduces the healing that the res can do, allowing you that window of ramp to get your stuff back on. Without poison, and there is not a Condi build in any of Guild Wars 2 that is actually good at cleaving without poison, in my opinion, because there's always a ramp, even on various Guardian builds, which is all burn oriented and even quite bursty in its Condi application. Obviously, I'm not running Torch though, it's too gimmicky in my opinion, so you can't really burst that crazy Condi on there anyway, the crazy burn stack. So it's that, but also, again, back to the 1vx scenarios, just constantly applying the poison here is huge for, like, so many of those fights. It cripples everyone's regeneration and ability to sustain, and then you can kind of blow them up. Again, the other thing, by the way, when you're on Wizard, and Wizard really is the 1vx one, it's not binary. A lot of Condi builds are very binary, right? So if you try and 1v1 or 1vx on a Condi build, you can kind of get completely counter-comped if someone just stacks enough cleanse and resistance. Like, it's very binary. It's, oh, you do damage or you do none. But when you're running, like, the hybrid variant, there is no one counter to all of it. You can just kill people through the flat hits, and if they try and stack resist, then they've made compromises in their build that leaves them vulnerable to your other just regular packets of damage. And the truth is that a bit of both will end up getting them down. But anyway, so yeah, I'm just running Doom and Smoldering. Now, you might question the Smoldering, but the whole idea, I'll just give you the actual concept here. The idea is to have max power, max crit chance, max Condi damage, 100% Condi duration. That's the idea. Now, no build really in Guild Wars can do that, but we can because we only really care about one Condi. I mean, yes, we have Doom, but that's for the asset of Doom, not the pressure of Doom, right? And yeah, we have a little bit of bleed, right? But really what we care about is burn. So because we only care about one type of Condi, we can actually get really, really high Condi duration, or high enough to matter, and then just sort of min-max with everything else. And Guardian's quite unique in that way because of some of its traits, right? So if you actually look here, I'm at 55% burn duration. And you might say, well, WP, you can go all the way up to 100. So no, this isn't min-max. That's true. You can go even higher if you like. And some of the staff stuff I'll end up talking about later with that. But the thing with PvP is there's a lot of cleanse. So it's kind of a trap. I think it's noob bait trying to go to the full 100% duration all the time and valuing expertise too much. Expertise really isn't the be-all and end-all, because if you've got a Condi that you're inflicting and it's supposed to last 15 seconds or so, that is going to be cleansed before its full duration. So I don't think you have to go too crazy. But we have very high burn duration here, all right? We have 55% duration. And what you're going to find as well is we have 100% crit chance with a very strong power baseline modifier there. We have everything really pressure-wise. The only thing we don't have is some ferocity. And there are some swaps we can do there. So that was really the dream with Wizard. And I guess I'll continue with the Wizard perspective as we go forwards. Then what you can see here is I'm on Traveler runes right now. which I also think are actually super necessary. So, Traveler Runes is plus to all stats. So, it's expertise, it's boon duration, it's condi damage, it's power, it's precision. All of it is useful. And a lot of it you might not really think of as that useful, but it is. And then you also get your flat condi duration and boon duration on top as well. So, it's worth a lot really here. The other option you can do, though, and it really is a thing, you saw me running it on the recent Mirage build, is Lynx. The problem with this build is speed, okay? Like, I cannot express enough to you guys how important mobility is in PvP. Mobility is everything. Being able to kite away, to shake pressure from people who are just following you around constantly. If you play a build with no movement abilities, which this doesn't have any that you're currently looking at, right? Like a rush or whatever. If you're a DH, you get the F2, you can actually create a gap or whatever. If you play a build that has none, and no, like, movement either, it's a terrible build, believe me. And it will only take a while for you guys to realize that. So I really believe that there is no way to run this build without something like Lynx or Traveler. In truth, and I've tried many, many times, right? Like I say, I've played almost anything, because you might be looking at Balthazar, right? So Balthazar is a valid rune set. Which does just a ton of burn duration. If we go to this, you can easily hit 100% burn duration. And it's got the condi damage on there, and it's massive damage. Thing is, with Balthazar, again, it puts you into that kind of binary situation, but without the passive 25%, it's just ugly as all hell. And you might say, well, but WP, you're a Firebrand. You do get swiftness. You can do this. And, you know, I played a ton of games doing this, right? Whenever I went off the rune set. Does this actually... Is there value here? You drain this, you get about enough swiftness to cover till it comes back up. Is that good enough? Well, no, because this will instantly be corrupted in any fight. If a Reaper's on you, they'll instantly corrupt it, and you're such a sitting duck. You might say, oh, well, WP, what about the F2 swiftness? You can run around with this. But this doesn't really have the juggle you need. It doesn't last long enough for the swiftness. And there's a whole major problem here in that you've used these tomes up. So what if you're using the F3 for a stun break? Well, you don't have that luxury anymore because you've already spammed through it. What if you're using it for in the middle of a fight to resist yourself and push forwards? It's just not viable in any way. I'm not saying it's not meta. I'm saying it's not viable. This is unstrippable, will always be there, and you will feel the difference. You have to have that 25% modifier somewhere. And Guardian doesn't get it anywhere except Dragon Hunter, and we're going Firebrand. So... yeah, Traveler is my rune of choice at the end of the day, and there are other variants. So Staff can give you reliable swiftness, which is where things might be able to change, but I think that's a different build, which I'm trying not to stray into that territory too much of, because there's a lot of nuance there, and some of you might be scratching your head completely with old Staff things, so let's just ignore that for now. Traveler runes. Traveler Wizard combo, pretty goddamn good, or the Lynx Wizard combo. Lynx obviously being more aggressively oriented, because you get the big power stack on there. And yeah, so you can see where our pressure and stuff comes from. Now let's talk about traits before we go into utility skills. So here is the variant that I'm running right now. And let's start off by talking about Valor. So there are condi opportunities in a lot of lines for Guardian. So like if you go Zeal... You've got Eternal Armory with the Spirit Weapon thing. I've seen some people trying. You've got, which means you can do burning on Spirit Weapons if you're going to dedicate a utility skill to that. You've got Kindled Zeal, which is condi damage based on your power. Sounds like a good idea for the Wizard Amulet approach, right? Increased flat damage to burning foes. Also a good idea for the Wizard's Amulet. So you've got a bit on Zeal. You've got a bit on... Honor as well. No, not Honor. Honor is the big Healy line. Honor, we really don't care about. Virtues, right? You got a bit on Virtues because you can run Permeating Wrath. So this means that instead of every 5 attacks you burn, it's every 3 attacks you burn, and it's AoE. So, I mean, this is really good against bodies, guys, because what it does, all right, is you put all your massive little packets of damage here. You're getting your 8 packets here. You're getting your several packets here. You're getting all your packets here. And then... you're constantly proccing the F1 passive, which never goes away because you're a Firebrand, right? And you can pick up Lawmaster. So even when you're in your tome, and it's on cooldown or whatever, you're just every 3 attacks, you're splashing AoE burn on both targets. So it splashes the AoE from the body onto the Razor, and on the Razor onto the body. So it like doubles up, it compounds. So Permeating Wrath is crazy, right? And you can get a bit of a stronger F2, and you can get a lot of things. There's condi stuff in many of the lines, and I've played a ton of games, especially on this, trying the Permeating Wrath variant. But in the end, guys, I would say it is non-viable to play without honor. Sorry, not honor. Valor. It is non-viable. Basically, if you want to not be a sitting duck, you have to take medis, and you have to take medis heal. Like, there just isn't a choice. Monk's focus is ridiculously strong. And the main thing I've really taken away from this whole experience, and I mean a really main thing, is truly learning why meditations are ran everywhere. Because if you try to escape Monk's focus, if you try and do any build, Firebrand bound, without the quality of life from the healing and the diminished cooldowns and the Condi cleanse and stuff here, without Monk's focus, it's just not a thing. Like, this interacts so heavily with everything else. So, like our heal skill here. I'm running the mantra, right? Now, when I wasn't using Monk's focus, there were a lot of interesting decisions. You know, I tried the Signet because you can give yourself stability during the cast with the Elite. And it's a huge heal. This is an enormous heal. I tried Shelter to see, you know, like the classic days, so you can guarantee you'll get the heal off because of the healing here. But it's funny, the first time I tried this, I immediately got deflecting shotted in the middle of it, and I realized there's a lot of unblockable in the game now, and Shelter's not even that reliable anymore. I didn't try Receive the Light, to tell you the truth. I tried Litany of Wrath without being Monk's focus, just because, you know, you're a high pressure build. So what if you Litany of Wrath, which is heal while you do damage. You give yourself Stab here and Retail, which I'll touch on in a second. And you just kind of go ham, and you can heal up, and it's kind of like just a perfect damage window for you because they can't even counter press you. It's just, none of it really is that good. But the second you run Monk's Focus, which is heal whenever you get a meditation, and of course in the same line, you get Lesser Smiter's Boon whenever you use a heal skill, which is a meditation. Suddenly, like, the mantra is like cleansing you, and the mantra is healing you, and the mantra is Condi cleansing you, and the mantra is so on demand you can just basically spam Lesser Smite condition off cooldown, and it's healing you that much more prominently, and it's pressuring for you, and it's just like ungodly sustain immediately just from running Lesser Smiter's Boon plus Monk's Focus and the mantra heal. I mean, it's crazy. And then suddenly at this point, Judge's Intervention, which is port, right, into a target, apply burn, and is a really important part of the build, you know, that mobility side of things. Suddenly this is cooling down quicker and healing you. Suddenly Contemplation of Purity is healing you much heavier. And, you know, you could go double interventions or smite condition here, you get even more cleanse and even more pressure. So this just, there's always a moment where a build clicks, and I had been playing with the pressure Firebrand idea for many games, and doing terribly, like dragging every single Q down without failure. And the second you run Valor, like, the build finally starts hitting a bar where maybe it can be a thing. And it really, I mean, it's a shame, I think, that Guardians are just so bound to this. And I can honestly say I really understand why. I've really learned why. Honestly, guys, give yourself like 50 Qs without running it, and then start running it, and you'll see that it's a whole other world. So yeah. It's basically like in PvP, the devs are saying, okay, you have to be Valor. And it's kind of weird for this kind of build anyway. So, yeah, and then the lines we run here are obvious. It's going to be Lesser Smite condition because the synergy is just too powerful. The others aren't that good even without the synergy, right? The middle, you can actually choose which one you want. You could maybe run the shield trait if you like. But don't forget, when you're a Firebrand, you're spending a lot of time in tomes, and when you're in tomes, you don't get the extra toughness from the shield thing. You're only on the shield set for, like, maybe a fifth of your gameplay, if not less. Seriously. Most of the rest of your gameplay, you're in your tomes or the other weapon set. So, just run strength in numbers, in my opinion. You get this benefit for yourself 100% of the time, and you give it to your allies, so why not, right? Communal defenses, the ICD is just a bit too high, but it might be okay-ish. But yeah, I'm just running strength in the numbers, and then Monk's Focus. So this is very easy, and you can basically just, I know I've got a lot of discussion in this video out of this here, just to talk to you guys about my experience and kind of log the game of Buildcraft, which is really what this video is about, right? But now, at this point, we can just kind of ignore this. This is about healing on our utilities and sustain. That's all it is. And it also just starts rolling tons of fury and a bit of might on us, by the way. So, hey. Which is nice. Let's talk about the other stuff. So, Firebrand itself. This is pretty simple as well. I've tried a ton of these different traits. I've actually tried Stoic Demeanor. So, the top line, there's more synergy here than people realize. First of all, the Axe Dazing. and the bit of bleed. You really don't care about the bleed. The bleed is so irrelevant. It's such a crap aspect of this, okay? And like I said, this is actually much more of a 1v1 build here. If you do this, you can 1v1 a lot better because you get so many interrupts and so much playmaking potential in terms of interrupting opponents' heals and just doing nice little things like that. With this actually starting to daze. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate how strong that is. I certainly didn't for a long time. You obviously get less tome pages, so that's juxtaposed with Archivist of Whispers, which reduces your tome pages. And this can feel really horrible when you get just a couple of pages, but you kind of get used to it. And when you're in these low man scenarios, when you're in more of a duelist thing and you're finding yourself on sides a lot, where you can succeed-ish, really, you're very vulnerable in the F1 is where all your pressure is, right? But you're very kind of vulnerable at the same time. So, it's kind of nice to dip back out just to get back to the Shield of Wrath blocks, just to get back to the Shield of Absorption heals and the Shield of Judgment block and, you know, the kite potential and backwards pressure of the Scepter attacks. So, you know, it works. It really can work. However, overall, Archivist of Whispers is huge and is the better way to play. And really, you shouldn't be dueling, to be honest. You should be with other people. You get so much value from being with other people. And the most important thing is when you run Archivist of Whispers, it lines up so that you can basically get very comfortably 2 Scorched Aftermaths into 1 F1. And this is the crazy damage here. So to be able to cast that twice while in the same tome is massive. And even you can double cast the 5, which also is an absurd ability. So really that's the big benefit of Archivist of Whispers. Not to mention you can roll more of all the quality of life of everything else. So this is just very, 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 very powerful. These other traits have to be really strong to keep up with this, basically. And I don't think ArenaNet realized just how strong. There is some possibility with this, by the way. And to talk about going the whole top line. So this dazes. This means that your mantra is a mob. And this means that whenever either of these lands, you give slow. So what this would mean is the symbol of vengeance now slows. That's not very good in 1vx's, though. And so the whole thing, I don't know. I don't really value Stoic Demeanor, and I don't really value weighty tomes. I did try. The best thing about weighty tomes is your mantras come back quicker, and that actually is really important. The heal mantra is so high value and so important to be able to spam. So the spam ability of this is massive. So you could definitely run something like this with weighty terms, but what you're giving up is protection on the F3. And the prot on F3 does feel pretty important. But maybe not the biggest thing in the world. So this is definitely a thing, and I played a few queues on this, and you can run this. And I think you'd be surprised how much sustain you get from it. You might be tricked into looking at legendary lore, and it's like, oh, but there's burning on here, and you're supposed to be doing damage, right? The thing is, what it does is it increases the duration of your burns here by 20%. But if you look at them, they're all very short anyway. So you can kind of get away with it in a lot of ways. And yeah, the mantra spam is not too bad. There's even a little bit of playmaking potential from having the emote come out. Just a little bit. Not that I can say I ever really effectively got it. But overall, I think that the truth is bottom is the way to go. Quickfire is a trap. The quickness stuff is a trap. You do like quickness because of imbued haste, which improves your condition damage and stuff. But really, bottom is the way to go. Lawmaster is extremely potent because, again, it means that you retain your passives while they're on cooldown. So you do your big burst on your F1, then you drop your F1, and you're still getting a lot of burns out. This would cripple your pressure outside of tomes if you didn't take it. And then there's just the fact that the skills themselves cool down quicker, allowing you to double cast and all that kind of stuff. And then legendary lore is pretty obvious as to why it's a thing. So yeah, these are the most intelligent swaps. You could run it like this, or you could run something like this. In rare situations, you could go with the axe. But overall, yeah, Firebrand's very simple. Bottom. Easy. And it's a bit of a shame, honestly, that it's so binary, in my opinion. Now, lastly, we come up to Radiance. Now, Radiance, there's a lot of fun you can play with, and it goes back to the hybrid thing of Wizard, which, if we remember here. So, I'll just talk about the obvious stuff here first, which would be this setup here. We get right hand strength, which increases our crit chance with the one-handed stuff. Axe is one-handed, so that's nice. And Scepter is one-handed, so that's nice. You get the value off of basically all your main stuff. You don't really have any on-crit Condi, So that's a bit irrelevant. But again, when you're running Wizard and you're the hybrid damage approach, it is kind of nice. Because obviously you want those crits. And with this, you can get to the 100% crit level fairly comfortably. Your other miner increases your crit chance when you're hitting burning people, and they will be burning while fighting you because of your passive, because your axe does burning, and your F1 burst does burning as well. Okay, so you got all of that. Radiant Fire here. We are not running Torch, but Radiant Fire is gain zealot. It reduces Torch cooldowns, which you can ignore. But what it means is when you crit someone, you get Zealot's Flame, which means you're just pulsing burns out around you, which is nice, okay? You can't then throw that Zealot's Flame. If we were on Torch, we could do that. But that's nice, and it increases our burn durations by 20%. So that's one of the reasons why we can get all the way up to 55, even though, you know, we don't have too much other stuff. I mean, we've invested in the Smoldering Sigils. But so this is really good. And then lastly, Amplified Wrath. Our burns hit 15% harder. So not only do we have a ton of Condi damage and all the expertise we need, but our burns hit more than any other class's burns by 15%. And then there's the really valuable bit here as well. Burn enemies when we block their attacks. This has so much synergy on the Firebrand, guys. It's so huge. So some people have paired this with like DH and stuff in the past, and they're like, oh, you can use the DH F3 and get 1 billion blocks. But the thing is, this has a 1 second internal cooldown on it, so you get some value out of that on the DH, obviously, right? But what's really nice on Firebrand is you get consistently rolling blocks all the time. So you got your Shield of Wrath here, block, 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 and in a low man scenario, you actually can get lots of individual Amplified Wrath ticks out of that. But then the mantra, right? It's like Aegis, and then Aegis comes back, and then Aegis comes back, and then Aegis comes back, and then you're on the shield, and then Aegis comes back, and then you go into this tome, and then Aegis comes back, and the F2, and Aegis comes back. The F2 is actually a great pressure skill on this build, because the actual impact of it hits hard. Like, that's 1,000 base damage there, because of all of our power and crit chance and stuff. But also, you get the Aegis, so you're still spamming burns out, you know, in a way, as long as you're being targeted, even on the F3. It's kind of funny. And so, again, when you're, like, kiting away from people and you're fleeing away, Amplified Wrath actually allows you to, and this is really important, hit back a bit and push people back, and that's so important for so many builds. Doesn't really help against Mirages because the clones, you know, proc it. One of the clones will, and then you just sort of get zerged down, but the Mirage story is a whole other thing. So anyway, Amplified Wrath. Now, that's one way you can run this build, okay? And you go out, you do your big damage, just like you saw at the opening of this video with some of the gameplay, and yeah, that's kind of the game there. But another way you can run it, and this is really, it's legitimate, it really is legitimate, is to swap the Grandmaster to Righteous Instincts. So, Retaliation increases your chance to critically strike and grants might each interval. But it's 50% crit chance. So that's the thing. The Wizard Amulet gives us some crit chance. We're up to 33. The Miner gives us 10%. This gives us, on the main hand stuff, a bit. But this is a whopping 50%, all here on alone. So with this is it. This is max precision, max Condi duration, max Condi damage. That's like the level to get at, right? So what the game here is you have Retail on you. You go into your F1, and you'll have the Elite Mantra up. You pop the Elite Mantra, which gives you stability, meaning it's difficult for them to interrupt your onslaught. But the Elite Mantra also gives you retaliation. Retaliation which lasts longer because of your runes, right? And so then you just spam these attacks through, and you can juggle Retail on yourself during the big burst of pressure, right? And then what you can do as well is, if that doesn't feel like enough, you can very easily run Healer's Retribution, which is gain retaliation whenever you use a heal skill. Now, that gets rid of the crit chance on the main hand weapons, but what it means is you have just ridiculous Retail uptime. And again, this is really good in low man scenarios because the Retail actually hits really hard. The Retail hits really hard because we have a ton of power on the Wizard Amulet, right? And that's what it scales off of. So, yeah, you have a lot of Retail bounce. And in your fights, you can be sure that it will be there. And you kind of just blow people up. I mean, truly blow people up. This is even negotiable. Radiant Fire, if you can find another way. If you do end up going Balthazar runes because of another setup, you can even, I mean, it's legitimate. It really is. You can run 250 ferocity and 10% damage increase. This is almost like now, taking this, while we have Retribution on us and Retail up, it's almost like you get the value of a Marauder Amulet out there. We're not as high as Marauder on the crit damage, but the 10% modifier on top It's close, guys. It's close, but with all the... So it's just like an insane pressure, right? That's kind of the thing. Insane pressure, depending on how you run the top line, combined with your amulet. The sustain you kind of need here on Valor, and then the Firebrand stuff underneath, obviously. And so that's kind of the build. There's a lot of other swaps that I've played with. So let's talk about some of the other things, some of the traps, and what doesn't work. Mantra of Flame doesn't... Basically, what I settled on in the end is you need the quality of life of all three of these. You needed them. The escape potential and gap close potential of Judge's Intervention is huge, and not to be underestimated. It's even a bit of burn pressure there. You don't have to worry about that too much. Smite Conditions pressure is crazy. But also the Condi Cleanse is nice, but that's on the lowest cooldown of all meditations, so you can just kind of spam that almost for a heal. The Contemplation of Purity is absolutely necessary against certain people that might jump you, like Mirages and stuff. You can Contemplation of Purity when you get Condi Bomb the first time, giving you time to get into the F2, to then use the Oasis for another one, and then the Smite Condition and the Lesser Smite Condition. You kind of just need all three of these, in my opinion, and that's the problem with any other thing. The Mantra of Flame just kind of isn't there, to be honest. It's not really an option. One of the things I loved the idea of was Mantra of Truth, because this is so incapacitating. Like a good thief gets on you, you can pop this blind, weakness, and cripple all at once that you can do multiple times. That's amazing, guys. It's really cool. But because it only casts in front of you, it never saves you. People just jump in behind you. They immob you, they daze you, they whatever. You spam the mantra to try and get them off, but because it's only in front... This has to be a circular AoE. I understand why the devs want the mantras to be cones in general, but this has to be around you. Otherwise, that build just will... That will not see play on this playstyle. I know some people have ran it on support Firebrands in the past, but it just won't. The Cleanse, it's like, well, you can run Smite Condition. It's just better because of Monk's Focus and all that stuff. Now, double medi is a thing. Double intervention, sorry, is a thing. And you could sub out maybe Smite Condition for it. Or Contemplation of Purity based on your matchup. So you're porting in and you're porting out. And you can even just use this at your feet to heal yourself substantially. Because it is a heal on its own. And then Monk's Focus on top. So it is a thing. And it's the same cooldown if you're swapping it for Contemplation of Purity. They're exactly the same. Probably has more playmaking potential. But you need, like, someone smart on your team who can sort of walk a little bit towards your nodes or wherever you are on the map so you can port to them to safety. And I mean, I really do think the playmaker potential is enormous on it. But without that reliance of other people to walk towards you, I don't know. I feel like it's too frustrating. Now, here's the biggest noob trap that I was running for a long time. Purging Flames, guys. Wow, let's talk about this. This is, like, the biggest single Condi damage bomb skill in the game. This is, like, obscene, the Condi pressure that you get from this. So, it's, when you cast it, it's like an AoE, right? That's constantly pulsing, 2 burn, and the 2 burn together last forever. 8,500 damage just from that one skill, and that can go up and up and up, and it reduces Condi duration on people in the area. Sounds good, right? It's even a fire field. Well, it's actually a complete noob trap, and the reason it's a complete noob trap, first of all, is obviously because you're missing out on the sustain from everything else. But here's the thing. This doesn't work how you might think it works. Elementalist players might be familiar with this, but a lot of them probably aren't. This is a classic ring of fire. So it's not constantly pulsing in the area like a symbol would, or most other AoEs in the game. It's not going tick, 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 and reapplying 2 burn, and reapplying 2 burn, and reapplying 2 burn. What it's actually doing is it is a ring of fire, and it will do the 2 burn on cast, but then if you want to apply the 2 burn again, the player has to cross the ring, right? And I don't know if it's like old Ring of Fire where it can't even be evaded. So it's most players don't know how this works. So what you can do is, if we imagine this llama pen is the node, you can cast it not directly on the node as most people would, which is a mistake. You cast it like halfway onto the node so that the line of the ring is in the middle, right? And what that does, so instead of like this, you cast it like this, okay? And what that does is, while your opponent is kiting around trying to survive, they keep going over the line. And they don't realize that they're doing it because of the mess of the combat and stuff. And if they do that, you can get like 20 burn on someone. It's crazy, just from that one skill. And they will instantly melt themselves. Or they'll go 2 burn and they'll cleanse. And then they'll 2 burn themselves and they'll cleanse. And then 2 burn again and they'll cleanse. And then 2 burn again. The thing is, it's one of those things where it's like, decent players will they'll be snidey twats about it because they'll know what the mechanic is, and they'll stand there, and then they'll call you a noob for running it, right? So this is one of the biggest things where it's like, oh, that guy's a noob. He runs that. He thinks I'm that bad at the game. Blah blah blah. So you know, it's not that good. It's not as high value as it looks. You can get some ridiculous kills if you guys are very new. If you're low gold or whatever, I do recommend the skill. But outside of that, it's probably not worthwhile. And the reduced condi duration just isn't as good as it looks, unfortunately. You know, I was talking about running another one of the lines before. There's even easy access to consecrations there. Which, you know, you can increase the duration and stuff of this, but it's probably not worth it. So there's a big story with Purging Flames. I ran that for a while, but generally not great. What else have I ran? There's the whole Spirit Weapon idea, which I immediately got turned off of and don't think's very good. None of the shouts really high value enough. Like, Save Yourselves is stuck in 2012 at the moment, unfortunately. Ooh, 1 3/4 second resistance for 50-second cooldown. Like, wow. Hello, ArenaNet. This just is not a thing anymore. Not with the way that Reapers are and stuff. Like, it's just, you don't see it. And I can't really think of any other skills, honestly, that there was a big story behind. None of the Spirit Weapons really have any value. There was a little bit of value behind Signet of Judgment, but basically what you're looking for in your utilities on this build is quality of life. You don't need aggression on them. The F1 is just a crazy nuke. You don't need anything damage-wise on these utilities. It's purely quality of life you're seeking. And when it comes to quality of life, there's nothing better than going triple medis and Monk's Focus. Alright, so to conclude and round this out, I want to talk to you guys about what I finally ended up settling on. Because I talked about a lot of options. What's my favorite iteration right now? The actual best? Well, it's actually not wizards at all, I'm afraid. So going to amulets and just talking about the theories behind various ones. Deadshot is like that very binary idea of purely just going about condi. And it gets the expertise on there, so you go all the way up to like 90% burn duration, and you know, you can kind of get some value out of that. I said that a lot of stuff gets cleansed, but in truth, going really high up to the cap on the burn duration is okay. For like F1, some of the skills, because the burn was so short there anyway. You know, but again, it's very binary on that. I even tried like Carrion ages ago. That's power and even tankier. It's a tankier variant because you get all the extra health. There's no precision there, but it's okay because you can get a lot of that. There's lots of valuable amulets, honestly, there really are. But my favorite in the end is actually an amulet I run a lot of Scourge stuff on, which is Sage. My favorite version is to go with a Sage Amulet and to not do the retail stuff, but instead to go Amplified Wrath, Radiant Fire, Right Hand Strength, and you still get a lot of that hybrid pressure there, and you still get a lot of crit chance. But here on Sage's Amulet, you get power, which is okay, and the hybrid pressure is a lot lower here. The power pressure is a lot lower because you still got a ton of power, but your crit is definitely lower here, right? You got the vitality, which you absolutely need. You emphatically need that. Do not run Sinister. Do not run Grieving. Do not run Destroyer. They all sound really exciting, but at 11,000 health and no real escape mechanisms, you are so dead. It's unbelievable. Don't even try it, right? So you got the vitality. You got the power. You got the condi damage and all your condi duration, so at 55%. But you also get a bit of healing power there. Just a little bit of healing power. Now, I do not view this as a healing build in any way. I really don't. But the healing there helps us too. Because what that does is that modifies all the Monk's Focus procs. So every individual packet from our heal mantra now heals us more. The Lesser Smite Condition heals us more. All 3 of the medis heal us more. And importantly as well, when we go to F2, we can actually heal ourselves a bit better by spamming this here. When we're on our shield, we can heal ourselves a bit better. So you actually get a ton of value out of that healing power there, just because so many little parts of the build offer little heals. So yeah, and then also the F2 is a little bit more worthwhile to your allies also. And if you really have to do that thing where you're babysitting your Scourge for a second, you can accomplish that to some extent. And this increases the playmaking potential in those 2v2s and in those team fights where things are really important. So yeah, that's kind of the line of thinking there. And Sage is where I have wound up, and this is my favorite variant right here, what you're looking at now. So yeah, there you go. That's kind of the conclusion. So yeah, there you go. That's the build. I've spent so long talking about it here. My original plan on the video was to show you some gameplay clips after I talked about the build, but I think I'll have to show them first of all, which means that at this point you guys have basically seen everything. So there you go. That's the Firebrand goodness. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching, and I will be playing a few more of these because I'm going to be moving on to a different weapon set and trying some other stuff out. I'll see how it feels. But yeah, really fun. And thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.